that's in the wrong thing. Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Friday, everyone's favorite day. There's not a ton of people here in the room. It's just Eunice, but hopefully more people will show up. I'm going to say good morning to some people. Jesse is here. Good morning, and Unadi is here. Good morning. Kayla's here. Good morning, Kayla. And Alicia's here. Good morning, Alicia. And Dunya's here. Good morning, Dunya. Okay, so. Oh, good, I did put it in the right one. Yes, so yesterday we were reading this article, right, about Jordan Peterson and his pronouns and kind of an argument that, I guess the argument was kind of going on between him and the university, but it kind of spiraled and grew and hit the media, and suddenly everyone was talking about it. And again, we're not talking about it right now, but a few years ago we were, and Jordan Peterson was making kind of a big splash in the media, and actually he kind of, in some ways, he kind of got famous out of this. Lots of people who didn't know who he was before definitely knew who he was after this whole thing. So
15-minute fame, right?
This is was his 15 minutes of fame. Maybe he'll have another 15 minutes later, who knows, but this was certainly it. We had talked yesterday about trying to figure out the arguments that are in this piece of writing. And it's not 100% clear because, Jordan didn't write this, right? So Jordan's not really getting a chance to lay out his argument perfectly, but we're trying to piece it together from what we know and what we are able to read. And I think we did, right? I think we kind of came up with something like this, right? So Jordan Peterson's argument was that he shouldn't be forced to use these gender-neutral pronouns by his university, right? Right, Eunice? Okay.
Yep.
And I think we said that these were kind of the premises, or at least this is what we were able to pull out of the article, right? We said that, or he said that, being compelled to use this kind of language, so being kind of forced to use it, will somehow lead to totalitarianism. Okay, we said that he said that this kind of ideological language empowers these power-mad people. We'll talk about that in a second, but that's what he said. And then I kind of added a couple of other things into the mix that might not have been super clear, but the idea that being forced to use this language violates his academic freedom, right? Because he's a tenured professor. There's also the idea that it somehow violates his right to free speech. Okay. So again, we'll come back to those premises and we'll kind of evaluate them later. But what I want to ask you now is, what's the other side of the coin here? What's the opposite argument, right? And we know that the conclusion will be that Jordan Peterson should have to use these pronouns in the classroom, right? We know that's the university's conclusion. But what are the premises for such an argument? Why should we believe that Jordan should use those pronouns?
Let me open the article.
Okay, you open the article. And again, people at home, you're going to have to help us out here today because there's only Eunice in class, and Eunice can't do everything. She can do a lot of things, but she can't do everything. So we're going to need your help today to make it through this one, okay? So we need premises or kind of reasons why the university should be able to tell Jordan Peterson to use these pronouns, okay? That's what we're looking for. Why should we believe that, right? Or, yeah, why should we believe that? I'll give you a minute or two to kind of get ready, or if you want to type some things in the live chat, that would be great. Good morning, Zartaj. So,
he's online too?
He's online too.
Oh.
So, yeah, if you want to type those things into the live chat, that will be really helpful for us because we don't want to make poor Eunice do everything.
I have to connect to the Wi-Fi.
So premises for the conclusion that Jordan Peterson should have to use those pronouns in class. Okay.
I'll have to look through the article again because yesterday I didn't highlight the reasons on why you
Oh.
should use pronouns in class.
Okay. Is that the case with online people as well? Do you need a few more minutes just to look the article over again? Is that what you need? Because if so, I can give you a few minutes. Once I figure out how to put my mask on. I can't
It's
do
so hard to connect to the Wi-Fi.
it. Is it?
Yeah. It takes a few tries.
Okay. So I'm going to put about 6 minutes on the clock here. Thanks, Unadi, for that. I'm going to put 6 minutes on the clock here to give you time to look over the article again. Again, we're looking. Hang on.
Why you should use pronouns, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll just. There we go. Let's throw that up on the screen. Move this over here. Yeah. So that's the conclusion of the university's argument that Jordan Peterson should have to use appropriate pronouns. We need some evidence, right? We need some, not so much evidence, but we need some premises. Why should we believe that? Or why should he believe that?
It's harder than I thought.
Well, and again, in this one, we might have to kind of use a little bit of our background knowledge or use a little bit of our kind of our common sense and things like that. So, but we'll get there.
there's not much reasons. I think we have to use our own words.
Yeah, and that's okay too. Okay. All right. So let's see what we have here, okay? So we'll use this as the conclusion. Again, it's up there. Why should Jordan Peterson have to use these pronouns, okay? So, can I get both of these on the screen? Okay. So Unadi's going to say she's having trouble seeing some reasons, which is okay. But I think it might be disrespectful for the person who wants Peterson to use a certain pronoun. Okay. What were you thinking, Eunice? And maybe some other people can chime in too.
I think that he should use the pronouns at least during class time to make the students feel accepted and welcome, so they still want to go to class and so they feel like they're in a safe environment.
Okay. So that's kind of, and I'm going to sort of combine that with Unadi's here, the idea that, that Jordan Peterson kind of needs to create a safe environment in his, he needs to create a safe environment in his classroom, right? He needs to respect his students, right? Because in part, that's kind of his job, right? As a teacher, yes, he's supposed to teach, but he also has a responsibility to create a safe environment in his classroom, right? And, that's kind of part of the job. That's part of the profession, right? And we talked about that yesterday in terms of free speech. Hang on. We talked about that yesterday in terms of free speech, right? Is that I can't really say just anything I want in here, can I? No, right? I have certain professional obligations, right? And one of my obligations is to show respect for my students, make sure that they feel safe, make sure that they feel supported, make sure that they feel accepted, right? To the degree I can do that. And so one of the premises might be that, the university is allowed to ask him to do this because that's kind of his job, right? There's freedom of speech and there's academic freedom, and then there's your job in the classroom, right? And part of that job is to Okay, good. That's good. That's good, Alicia. Sorry about that. Um, One of his jobs is to create that environment, right? So, an environment of safety and respect for the students in the classroom. So that's good. What else might we say? If you need some help, maybe we can turn one of these other premises around, like the last one. So, one of Jordan's premises might be that using this language violates his academic freedom. But what did, what did we kind of, I think we kind of agreed yesterday that maybe it didn't. Do you remember that?
It doesn't, because what he teaches doesn't really isn't related to the pronouns.
Yeah, right. His research, his area of research isn't, gender pronouns. His area of research is psychology, right? And social psychology. And so the university's not telling him what to research or what to publish, right? That's not what's happening here. They're just telling him to, use certain pronouns in the classroom. And so he might say that it violates his academic freedom. I'm not sure that it does, right? I don't think this infringes on his research at all. This is different, right? Research and teaching are not the same thing. And so Jordan can research whatever he wants and he can publish whatever he wants, but his job in the classroom is different, okay? Even though he works at the same place, it's a different thing, right? So if we turn that one around, we can say that, well, actually, it isn't a violation of his academic freedom, okay? So that could be a premise as well. Can we turn around that other one, the last one? What do you think, Eunice?
I think we can, but I don't know how to say it.
Okay. Give it a whirl. It can be totally wrong. I won't judge you, I promise. I'm wrong all the time.
I just don't know what to say.
Well, what do we say about your right to free speech? Because you gave us a definition yesterday, and I kind of contradicted half of it, right?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah. So you said that the right to free speech is kind of to say whatever you want, right?
As long as you're respectful and like considerate of others.
Yeah. So your right to say, your right to express yourself you cannot use that right to take away the rights of others,
Yeah.
right? And so here in Canada, we have a limit in terms of hate speech, right? You're not allowed to use your freedom of speech, pardon me, you're not allowed to use your freedom of speech to spread hate against other groups, right? Because that infringes on their right not to be discriminated against, right? And so all of our rights have some sort of limit to them, and one of the limits is that you can't use your right to take someone else's rights away. Okay, that doesn't work, right? So is this violating his right to free speech?
No.
Why not?
Because he still can say what he wants. It's just that he's respecting his students. Like he's free to say like his own opinions, but in class he should at least make the students feel comfortable and respected. So
Oh,
he can
that's
do
good.
his thing.
Yeah, that's good. So the idea here, Eunice's idea here is maybe that, he can still, he can still feel however he wants about transgender people and about pronouns, and he can speak out about it. But when he's in class, again, he's upholding a professional standard, he's doing a job, and therefore, he has to use the pronouns, right? He doesn't, when he's outside of the class, he can say whatever he wants, right? As long as he doesn't take away the rights of others or spread hate speech. And I think we agreed that this probably isn't really hate speech,
Yeah.
what's going on here. But his, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, he can think what he wants and say what he wants, but inside the classroom, he has a job to do.
They
Right?
respect his students, and he's still free to say what he wants after all.
Yeah. And, you know, most jobs I think are like that, right? If you have a job and you're dealing with customers, you don't get to say whatever you want to the customers, do
Don't
you?
swear at them.
No, you don't swear. You don't swear at them, even though you might really want to, and they might really deserve it. You can't, right? You're supposed to be polite to them, no matter how jerky they are. And so, you know, it's kind of the same thing here, right? Jordan has a responsibility to the students, and he's allowed to think what he wants and say what he wants, but in the class he has um, to respect the students. Now, I'm just looking at what Harry's written here. Just give me a second.
Can you put up what he said?
Yes, I'm just.
Oh.
Actually, yeah. Okay. So this is a good point. This is a good point that Harry has made here. And so Harry says, of course, that the university is trying to implement the policy of inclusivity so that the individual thoughts of one person are overruled by the greater agenda at hand. And, you know, to some degree that's true, Harry. And, you know, we're kind of oversimplifying this issue because there's and you may know about this, but there's a bigger issue in terms of, you know, what's been called cancel culture and what's going on university campuses in terms of free speech and sort of allowing ideas to be heard in academic discourse. There's a bigger thing going on there that we kind of haven't gotten into. So you may know about that, and you know, your comment here leads me to think that you do know a little bit about that. And it's true, right? Is that to some degree, sometimes we do overrule the thoughts of, you know, some people for a larger goal, right? For a larger idea. And so this is the balance that we always have to strike, right? Between the individual and society, right? So, you know, if individuals can do whatever they want and say whatever they want, that's generally not good for society, right? That's kind of chaos, right? Where everyone just does and says whatever they want. But the other extreme is not good either, right? Where everyone has to do and think and be the same way, right? That's kind of an oppressive, you know, totalitarian 1984 Nazi Germany kind of environment, right? Where there's one ideology and everyone must follow it or, you know, be pushed aside kind of thing. And neither of those are good, right? All societies have to kind of find a balance between the individual and society. How do we give people as much freedom as we can while also ensuring that people follow enough rules so that, you know, we can all cooperate and get along and feel safe, right? That's always the balance that you have to strike. And, you know, depending on what kind of country you come from, or what society you come from, people will have different ideas about that, right? So, for instance, if you go to the United States is much more individualistic, right? They believe in freedom in America.
Oh, that one.
Yeah, right? They believe in freedom, and you should be able to do whatever you want, right? And so, but they're
Human rights.
yeah, but they're struggling with that a little bit now because of COVID, right? People just want to do whatever they think they want to do, but, you know, in a pandemic, you really need people to follow the rules, right? You need everybody to kind of do the same thing, and it's not really working very well. Societies that are a little more collective, right? A little more interested in, you know, the rights of society, they're doing a bit better, right? So Canada's doing a little bit better because we're not quite as individualistic as the United States is. But anyway, I'm kind of getting off on a tangent here, Harry. But this is true, right? Like, this is what's happening, because the balance here, or the equation that we're trying to figure out, is who is in need of more protection, right? is Jordan Peterson's right to think and say what he wants, is that more important than protecting a vulnerable group of students and staff? Right? That's the equation that we're trying to solve, that the university is trying to solve. And the university is, their view here is that these transgender people, this sort of small vulnerable community, they need to be protected more than Jordan does, right? So Jordan's right to say what he wants is going to be limited here, so that we can ensure that this small group of people will not be discriminated against, right? And again, we'll talk about this a little bit later in the course too, but sometimes it's not easy to figure out when you have rights that are kind of, rights that are kind of in conflict, right? They're bumping up against each other. You have to kind of decide whose rights are going to take precedence, right? And usually what they're looking at is who's more vulnerable, right? And so here we have, transgender people on one hand who are not entirely accepted in society and face prejudice and discrimination and violence, like Laverne Cox told us, or, are we worried about protecting Jordan Peterson, who is a white male, tenured professor at the University of Toronto, right? And he doesn't really need as much protection as this vulnerable group does. And that's probably why the university is is kind of pushing this on him, because he doesn't really need to be protected here, but these people do. Yeah. Oops. Yeah. That's exactly. Yeah. That's exactly the case, right? He wants his freedom, and to some degree he can have it, but in the classroom he has to create space for that small population, right? That's the compromise. And again, societies are all about compromise, right? Because again, if you just let everyone do whatever they want and say whatever they want, yeah, you're going to have chaos, right? Nobody wants to live in that. But again, the other side, the other extreme is not good either, right? So we always have to try to figure out the balance. And here the university is kind of saying that, we need to protect these people, right? They deserve protection, right? They deserve respect, like Unadi mentioned earlier. And so because they deserve that, we're going to limit the freedom of Jordan Peterson. Now, whether it's academic freedom, whether it's freedom of speech, or whether it's just, his ability to do what he wants as a teacher, however you want to describe that freedom, the university is saying we're putting a limit on that, right? You have to do things. And again, that's for the greater good as well, right? Because again, I'm a teacher, and there are limits to what I can do and say in this room, right? And that's good, right? I'm happy that those limits exist, because I think I have good judgment. I think I know what I should and shouldn't do in here. But some people don't have good judgment, right? And so the limit is important, so that we ensure that people are being professional, right? And so I welcome those limits, because it's important, right? It's important to keep students feeling safe and respected, right? And so, he thinks differently, obviously. Jordan Peterson thinks differently than I do. But yeah, that's exactly correct, Harry. It's trying to find that balance. Sometimes it's not easy, but that's kind of what's going on here. So, let me see. So we had this here, right? So we said that he should have to use appropriate pronouns, right? Why? Well, it's not a limit on his academic freedom. He can research and publish what he wants. It's not really a limit on his free speech either, right? It's just asking him to do this in the classroom while he's teaching. And I think we've kind of exposed another premise of this argument too, the idea that these people need to be protected, right? The Constitution says that you cannot discriminate against people based on their sexuality, their I'm not sure if gender is no gender is in there. Their gender, their sexuality. You're not allowed to discriminate against people, right? And so it doesn't make, sorry. You're not allowed to discriminate against people. These people, these transgender students and staff, have a right not to be discriminated against, right? And so that could be a premise too, right? Is that, our, the rules of the university, the rules of the country say that you can't discriminate against people on this basis. So, Jordan, don't do it. Okay? Does that make sense so far? Okay. So let me just see what I have on my next slide here, because I'm going to remind myself what. Okay, so here we go. They should have to use the pronouns. Premise, because people have the right not to be discriminated against. Okay, good, we got that. We didn't talk about that. I'll talk about number 2 in a second. Being compelled to use this language doesn't violate his academic freedom. We said that. Being compelled to use this language does not violate his right to free speech, right? So number 2, we didn't talk about this, the idea that when you discriminate or when you sort of do not accept, in this instance, transgender people, it opens up space for others to speak against them as well, right? And you'll see this happen quite a bit, and it especially happens with people who are kind of popular, okay? Like celebrities, people with a lot of power, people that everybody listens to. When they speak up about something, whether they're for something or whether they're against something, it will open up space for others to say the same thing, right? And so we saw that under Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump said a lot of racist, sexist things, and because he did, other people were emboldened, right? They felt, oh, well, the president thinks this, so I must be right, so I'm going to say it too, because I think that, but I would never say it. But now that the president is saying it, I'm going to say it too, right? And similarly, it works the other way, right? When you speak positively, right? When you speak in acceptance of, say, transgender people, that opens up space for other people to stand up and express support as well, right? So Jordan Peterson not accepting these people creates more space for others to stand up and say the same, right? And so, again, at some of his public talks, like some white supremacists have shown up and all kinds of weird people who have pretty extreme views. But again, he's kind of opening up that space, right? Whether he means to or not, it just kind of happens, right? So the more people speak up, in favor of transgender people, the more other people will stand up too. If he stands up and doesn't accept them, the more people will stand up and sort of reject them as well. So you can create space, right? Especially if you're, a celebrity or someone that people listen to, you can create space, and you can create space for support, or you can create space for, for negative ideas. It works both ways. And
what you say and do, I think it highly influences other people.
Yeah. Yeah, it influences people, and at the very least, it just encourages them to speak up as well, right? Either for positive or for negative, right? It works both ways. And again, Donald Trump was very good at saying all kinds of negative things, and it had a negative effect, right? A lot of other people stood up and said negative things too, right? Okay. So that's good. We've got 2 arguments here. What I would like to do is take a quick break, then we'll come back and evaluate these arguments and just see where we land on this issue. Okay? So take a break. I'll see you in 10 minutes and we'll evaluate both of these arguments. Okay, and we are back. So, as promised, let's try and evaluate these arguments, okay? So yesterday, I think Zartaj reminded me that when we're going to evaluate an argument, we have to look at the premises, right? To see if they are true and to see if they logically support the conclusion, okay? So let's start with this one since it's on the screen, okay? First premise, people have the right not to be discriminated against. Is that true?
I think so,
Yeah, it is true, right? People have the right not to be discriminated against. That is true. Is that a reason why we should use these gender pronouns? Yeah, right? That's logical support for the conclusion. Why should we use these pronouns? Well, because people have the right not to be discriminated against, right? So that's a logical support and it's true. What about the second one here? Discrimination and non-acceptance of transgender and gender non-binary people emboldens others to discriminate as well, right? It creates space for those people. Is that true?
Yep.
Yeah, it absolutely is, right? When people start to speak out, either positively or negatively, it creates space for others to do the same. So that's true. Is that a reason why we should use gender pronouns?
For people who want to be referred to as a
Yes.
pronoun.
Yeah. Right? Because it shows that we accept them and therefore it will encourage other people to accept them as well, right? If we show that we don't accept them, it will create space for other people to stand up and say that they don't accept them either, right? So that's good. That's logical support. Being compelled to use this language does not violate Jordan Peterson's academic freedom. Is that true?
True.
True. Is that a reason why we might ask him to use those pronouns? Yeah, right? We might ask him to use the pronouns because it's not violating his academic freedom, right? He's fine. What about the last one? Does being asked to use this language, does it violate his freedom of speech?
No.
No, it does not, right? So that premise is true. Is it logical support for the conclusion?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? That's a reason why we might ask him to use the pronouns because it doesn't violate his right to free speech. Okay, so here we have an argument it's got 4 premises. They're all true, right, as near as we can tell, and they're all logical support for the conclusion. So do we have a good argument here? Yeah, good argument. All right, let's go to Jordan Peterson and evaluate his argument. Let's look at premise number 1. So he said that being compelled to use this language leads to totalitarianism. Is that true?
What's without?
Totalitarianism is a state where the government controls everything, right? Where the government is in control of basically every aspect of people's lives. They have total control, right? So again, think North Korea, think fascist states, think to make.
Oh.
Yeah, so he shouldn't be made to use this language because it will lead to totalitarianism. Is that true?
I don't think so. It doesn't really not that I hear the premises for the why he should use pronouns. The premises for the reasons why he shouldn't be forced to use gender neutral pronouns. It all seems all wrong.
Well, yeah, this one doesn't. And this one doesn't seem to make a lot of sense,
Yeah,
right?
now that I look at it again after hearing the
Yeah.
those other premises.
Like if someone, yesterday I was kind of saying, oh, if Zartaj asked me to call him something, I would do that. Now, if I called Zartaj by a pronoun that he asked me to call him by, how does that lead to a totalitarian government in Canada,
Yeah.
right?
Doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. It's a long walk, right? It's a long walk from one thing to the other. And he would really have to explain to us what he means because that's, I said this earlier when we were talking about arguments is that some things are kind of intuitively true. You know, like we don't have to sort of prove them because, you know, why do people eat ice cream? Because it tastes great, right? That's kind of intuitive, right? You know that ice cream tastes really good, right? We don't have to sort of prove it. But in this case, it's just not clear how one thing leads to the other,
Yeah.
right?
It's disrespecting someone when they get asked to like get called by a pronoun. It's just to respect someone. I don't think it would lead to like something like that.
No, it's just kind of hard to imagine how this is true,
Yeah.
right? And you know, again, maybe he has, you know, a bigger explanation for why it's true. Unfortunately, we don't really have it here, but it's kind of not intuitively true, right? We can't really picture how we get from one thing to the other. How do we get from pronouns to an oppressive government? Hard to know, right? So is this one true?
No.
I don't.
It
Not
all
not.
seems wrong now.
Yeah, right. Not as near as I can tell.
Yeah.
Right? Not as near as I can tell. Is it logical support for the conclusion?
No. It all seems wrong.
I know, but stick with it for a second. So if that were true, if using those pronouns would lead to a totalitarian government in Canada, should we use those pronouns?
No.
No, we shouldn't. So it's actually logical support for the conclusion, but it is not true,
Yeah.
right? So it's kind of a problem. Let's look at the second one here. Ideological language, such as this, so using these kind of pronouns, empowers these power-mad people. Is this true? Yeah, like gives power to. Is this a true premise?
Ideological language is like the pronouns. Right?
Yeah. And I think what he's talking about is kind of all the language around inclusivity and social justice and transgender people, all the terms and language that I've been teaching you. All the kind of new words that we have come across. That's what he's talking about. But is it true that somehow using these words empowers, and who are these power mad people? Is it the Human Resources Department of the university? Or who is it?
The higher
Yeah, okay. I don't know. What do you think about this? Is this a true premise?
I don't think so.
Are these people power mad? I don't know. Like, it seems a little bit. I'm going to use a fancy English term here. Maybe if you remember your English class, it seems a little bit hyperbolic. It's hyperbole.
I don't know what I forgot.
Yeah, if you remember, hyperbole is an exaggeration,
Oh.
right? I have a ton of homework, right?
Not really.
Yeah, you don't have a literal ton of homework, you're exaggerating, right? But you have a lot. And so here I think this is a little hyperbolic, right? It's a little bit of an exaggeration. Is it true? I don't know, right? Who are you talking about? How does it empower them, right? How does me using a pronoun in class suddenly give more power to power mad people, whoever they are, wherever they are? I don't know.
It's just respecting someone by using the pronouns they prefer. Like it's not that hard to do.
Yeah, this is a small thing, right? It's not the end of Western
Doesn't have to be
civilization.
big.
Yeah, right. So is this one true? It's,
No.
yeah, it's kind of hard to know how it's true, right? Is it logical support for the conclusion?
I guess so.
Yeah, it is, right? So, because if it were true, if using this language empowered power mad people, that's probably a bad thing, right? We don't want to give more power to power mad people, right? So again, it's logical support for the conclusion, but it's kind of hard to imagine how it's true, right? It's kind of strange. Let-
Everything doesn't really make sense now that I read the other like premises.
Yeah. How about the third one here? Does being compelled, so being asked to use this language, does it violate his academic freedom? No, right? So is this premise true?
No.
No, it's not. Is it logical support for his conclusion? Yeah, right? If it did violate his academic freedom, then yeah, that might be a reason not to use it, but it doesn't. Same thing with number 4. Is that premise true? No, it's not. Doesn't violate his freedom of speech. If it did, would that be a reason to not use the pronouns?
Yes.
Yeah, right? So this is interesting, right? Because here we have an argument where all of the premises logically support the conclusion, but the problem is it's kind of hard to see how any of them are true, right? So the last two we're pretty sure are not true. We've decided are not true. The first ones, I don't know. I think we're going to need some explanation about what he means.
Yeah.
They're not really easy to understand how they might be true.
Yeah.
So when we look at this argument versus this argument, who do you think has the better argument here?
Definitely this one.
Yeah, right? These
Makes more sense now.
Yeah, this argument seems to make more sense, which is interesting, right? Because Jordan Peterson he's a professor of psychology, right? You think he would be kind of better at this.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, like he's not making a very good argument. Right? And sorry, Harry's got. I just want to address Harry's comment here. People with ulterior motives will come up with any reason to prove their point. Yeah, well, yeah, exactly the case, right? That first premise. Well, we'll go back here. Yeah, that first premise is that's a stretch, right? It's a long walk from one to the other, right? And again, it's an exaggeration, right? It takes something, it takes something small and blows it all out of proportion,
Yep.
right? And again, it's hard to imagine how one thing leads to the other. Yeah, good. That's a good point, Harry. And so, yeah, this is interesting, right? Because again, you would think that Jordan Peterson would be able to make a better argument for this, but he's really not, right? I think the university and the sort of transgender and gender non-binary supporters on campus, they're the ones making the good argument here, right? And so I'll leave it to you to which one you want to believe, but yeah, I think Jordan Peterson has kind of failed to win his case here, right? Okie dokie. Any questions on Jordan Peterson or this issue before we kind of continue on? Because that was good. We got where we needed to get. It wasn't easy, but we did figure out these two arguments. So that was good. But yeah, any last questions or comments before we move on?
Not from me. Try to ask the rest of the students. Invisible ones.
The invisible students. They're all nodding and saying they understand everything. Okay, let's move on a little bit here. So I'm gonna just go here. Okay, so let's move on and talk a little bit about sexism and popular culture, because I did promise that we would do that. I said that this unit was going to be about trying to look at sexism kind of through the lens of popular culture and how popular culture helps to kind of spread sexist ideas and maintain sexism at least in Western culture, okay? So the first thing I want to look at is advertising, okay? Because we are advertised to all the time, right? I have some statistics here that I found. I think that probably some of them are correct, but some of them are a little out of date. 88% of American teens have mobile phones. I think the percentage is closer to like 102% at this point. 56% of teens go online several times a day. I think that's out of date. I think people are online all the time, right? Your messenger apps or whatever are always connected. You know, you're always connected. So again, I've pulled some stats here, but I think they're out of date. And people are basically online, connected to the internet and to social media all the time. And in that social media, whether we're, you know, on Instagram or whether we're watching YouTube videos or wherever we are, we're seeing ads for things, right? We're at the SkyTrain station waiting for the SkyTrain and we're looking at advertisements, right?
Posters, right?
Yeah.
I see that one a lot.
Yeah, posters all over the place, right? We don't have to look very far to find someone trying to sell stuff to us in some way, in some form, right? But the question is, are you affected by, do you think advertising works on you?
Sometimes. Depends.
What kind of ads really work on you?
I'd say if it's like popular food, I don't wanna miss out. I wanna try how it tastes.
Okay.
But for clothing, it
Yeah.
doesn't really like affect me. Like I just buy the clothes that I feel comfortable wearing.
Okay.
And well, like for iPhones, you know,
Okay.
that kind of stuff. I don't get a new phone unless I need to.
Okay. So the tech ads and the fashion ads don't really get you,
No.
but the food does.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, they make it look so good, right? You
Yeah.
know, and on the commercial when the pizza's coming out of the pan and the cheese is all stretching and looks
Like,
so good.
Oh, I have to try that one.
Exactly, right? So, yeah, I mean, you know, we can think about, you know, oh, you know, ads do or don't work on us, but kind of the reality is that the advertising agency is or the advertising world is very sophisticated, right? They know a lot about sociology, which we've been talking about in this class. They know a lot about human psychology and human brains and how they work. They spend a lot of money and do a lot of research to figure out how to influence you and me, right? How to get us to buy the things that they want us to buy, right? And so, again, it's a very sophisticated industry. It's a very research-based industry. There is a lot of science that goes into what advertisers show us. But one of the things that advertising does, and not really on purpose, is that it tends to reproduce stereotypical or sexist ideas, okay? And again, it doesn't really set out to do this, but it often does this in the process of trying to sell to us, okay? So how does it do this? Well, let's look at this. Here we have a bunch of kids' toys, as you probably can recognize. Are these boy toys or girl toys?
Boy.
These are boy toys, right? So again, most of us have been to a toy store or, you know, a place where they sell toys, and, you know, certainly there are some toys that are, you know, that are not gendered, right? If you buy a game of Monopoly or something like that, it's not a gendered game. But some toys are very highly gendered, and so here we have an example of toys that are kind of made for and marketed to boys.
Oh, but I have a female cousin. She's in year 1 right now.
Yeah?
She loves boys toys so much more compared to like girl toys.
Sure. That's very interesting, but I'm gonna press pause on that and we'll come back to her.
Yeah.
But before we get to her, I wanted to ask, so if these are toys that we give to young boys to play with, or that we advertise to young boys and say, this is what you should play with. What kind of messages are these toys sending to young boys? What kind of things do you see represented here? What do these toys say about what boys should be or how they should play? Or
young boys should like be interested or play only like boy things like superheroes, like building Legos, guns, Nerf guns,
Yeah.
trucks, and stuff like don't play with the Barbie dolls or something.
Yeah, because what are these toys like? Right? What are they? So Unadi, I'll need a little more from you here, but Unadi says that one of the messages here is that boys should be brave. What makes you say that based on the toys that we see here? That they should be brave. What are the messages sent to young boys from the toy aisle?
Not sure.
Okay. Well, let's see. Maybe Unadi will give me a little bit more there. Let's look at. Well, let's look at messages of violence, for instance.
Oh right.
Right?
Guns.
How many of these are? Yeah. So we've got guns, right? Which are, these guns have no other purpose than to shoot other people, right? That's what they're doing. But look how many of the other toys have weapons as well. Superheroes, right?
Because in the movies, like they're fighting, right? So like it might affect little young boys to start beating their friends up with the shields and bow and arrows and that they have.
Yeah, like kind of play violence is encouraged, right? Because we've got all of these toys that are weapons, or we have toys that are little men, right, who also have weapons, right? We've got kind of a military Lego truck here, and they've got guns and bazookas and things like that. And then we've got superheroes, right? And they all have weapons, except for Groot, but Groot doesn't need a weapon. He is a weapon. So yeah, we have this kind of message of play violence, right? And kind of, boys should act out this violence by being sort of brave or by being soldiers or superheroes, right? And maybe connected to that is Adon's. Oh, actually, no. Maybe this is another idea. So maybe that they should be protective. Right? So, what about these toys makes you kind of think about protection?
Make sure other boys don't steal your toys.
Well, yeah, but I mean, what else is going on in terms of protecting other people?
Police with those cars, like defend the city, like.
Yeah, we see boys as protectors of others, right? So here we've got a little police car. Superheroes, that's kind of their job, is to protect other people. And sometimes the military as well, right? Their job is to protect people, right? Sometimes. Yeah, so there's some messages about violence and that violence is kind of cruel. But there's also some messages about being brave and being protective and stuff like that. What other messages are coming through here?
Work hard and I guess be the one to work and be the one.
Yeah, something about working hard and being the one to work and make the money. What makes you say that, Eunice?
I guess the trucks,
Yeah, we've got some construction.
building, making this, making that, like Lego blocks.
Yeah.
You have to assemble it yourself and stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of there's a lot of building and assembling going on, right? Whether the toy itself is being assembled or whether you have sort of construction toys to dig in the sandbox or whatever you want to do with it. Yeah, and I'll give you a fancy word here, and you might like this word, but a fancy word that you might want to use for this is something called agency. Okay? And so in this context, agency means kind of like the ability to make something happen in the world, right? If you have agency, you're able to make a change, you're able to do something, right? And these toys have a lot of messages of agency, right? These young guys can go out there and, you know, defend the country, right? Or they can build a skyscraper, right? Or they can protect people, or they can be superheroes and throw their shield around or something, right? Being out there doing things in the world and making some kind of having some kind of an effect, right? That's agency, the ability to do something, right? And boys' toys have a lot of that, right? A lot of agency, going out there and doing something. Now,
Female toys. Yay.
yes. Now, here we have a selection of female toys, right? And again, you know, there are toys that are not gendered like this. Yes, technically, boys can play with girl toys, and yes, of course, girls can play with boy toys as well. But we can also agree that these toys are specifically marketed to girls, and mostly young girls are the ones playing with them, right? For the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, same question. What kind of messages are we giving to young girls through these toys?
Women should stay home and cook.
Well, what makes you think
and
that?
take care of the house. That one, it's like a cooking set. Like it's getting you ready to cook and stuff. And
Right. The idea that women should be at home, kind of cooking and looking after the house, right? And
take care of the kids.
taking care of the kids. Yeah. So we've got in the top right there, we've got a little kitchen set, right, with all the things you need to make a meal. Then in
I'd
the
still play with that.
it looks good, right?
Someone gave me that, I would have been over the moon.
I know toys are great nowadays.
Nostalgic.
You know, they weren't as good when I was a kid, but they're really good now. The bottom left, there's a little baby, right? So this is interesting, right? Because we're almost teaching children we're teaching little young girls to raise children.
Yeah.
But how old of a little girl would you say would play with that little doll?
Kindergarten.
Or younger, even?
I still used to play with that back in elementary and
Okay.
like my early years of junior high school.
Okay.
I had a huge dollhouse. It was so fun.
Okay. But so yeah, but it's interesting how, like, you know, some of the children playing with that doll are actually children themselves, right? And we're teaching them to raise children when they're still children, right? So yeah, we've got some ideas here about women in the home. We've got some ideas about, you know, cooking and raising babies, kind of thing.
And dressing up.
And dressing up. Okay, so fashion is important, right? Or a woman's looks, right? So what makes you say that?
Well, those babies' toys, usually they have outfits you can change them into, right?
Right?
And the hairdresser, like you can style your hair and stuff.
Yeah.
I
So
remember that one.
so definitely the little makeup table there, right? That's you know, that shows the importance of women's appearance, right? That she has to go there and get her makeup and make herself all pretty, right? What about bottom right?
Barbie?
Yeah.
Women should just go shopping and enjoy and like stuff.
Enjoy. So the message that women should go shopping or should enjoy shopping, right?
Yeah.
Maybe also that message you said about woman's appearance, right? Because there's a bunch of Barbies you can buy, and
Search the clothes out.
it's all about fashion, right? It's all about changing outfits,
Makes me want to stop by Toys R Us.
and you said you weren't affected by advertising. I'm not even advertising to you, and it's working on you, Eunice.
Ouch.
Well, it's okay. Yeah, so, but it's interesting how these messages are quite different from the ones that we send to boys, right? Those messages about violence, number one, but also, agency and sort of the ability to get out there and do things. Here, we're kind of encouraging women to really not get out there and do things, right? We're encouraging them to kind of stay in the home and sort of do traditional things like cook and do their makeup and raise babies and, look pretty in fashionable outfits, right? So we're really kind of sending a particular set of messages to one gender and then a totally different set of messages to the other, right? Which is interesting. But it doesn't really stop there, because what you'll see is that a lot of products are gendered, okay? So advertisers, often when they're selling their product, they're trying to figure out who's my market, right? Who am I selling this to? And more often than not, they will try to sell to one gender or another. So I ask you, knowing of course that everyone can eat everything, are these girl foods or boy foods?
Girl.
These are girl foods. What makes you say that?
Fruity.
What's that?
It's fruity, like fruity. Women usually like fruits.
Oh, okay.
That's, I guess.
There's a stereotypical idea that women like fruit. Okay. What else is going on here?
Salad.
Salad. Why are women more likely to have salads than men?
Women want to keep their shape and body, and they want to stay fit.
Oh, they want to
healthy,
keep their
mind their appearance.
They want to stay in shape and mind their appearance, because of course we taught them to when they were little. We taught them that their appearance was important, so now they can eat salads, right? So the fruitiness, the yogurt is definitely a womanly food. Any yogurt commercial you see, there'll always be a woman in it. I don't know why yogurt is a woman food, but it just is. What about the chocolate cake? Women, why?
Now that I think of it, I've never really seen guys buy and eat pizza.
Yes, you may. Are these girl foods or boy foods, Tom?
Girl.
Yeah?
See,
Why do
even
you,
here.
what makes you say that?
The thing is, though, because I'm an old sexist. I'm 62 years old. Men do not drink lady drinks like this.
See,
No.
it's
This? What's this? This is food for animals. Rabbits. Okay, we might have some chocolate cake.
Yes. But why is the chocolate kind of associated with women, Tom?
Because chocolate stimulates loving emotions.
Ooh.
That's right. And of course,
Yeah.
men cannot talk about love because.
No.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
That's definitely a lady drink.
Well, okay, and so now, are these women foods or man foods?
Man
Man.
foods.
How do we know these are man foods?
Women. Because men usually do the barbecuing, even though I eat a lot of meat too.
Yeah, so men are kind of associated with the barbecue pretty
Men
much
are
all the
associated
time.
with murder,
Yeah.
and women are associated with gently collecting vegetables.
Oh, I see. There's a hunter-gatherer kind of connection here.
Woman nice, man bad.
Ah, I see.
And the
think that's
drinks
it.
too.
And
Girls
the-
usually drink once in those fancy slim cups. Men are the big cups with the
Yeah.
stronger drinks.
And what's in that big cup?
beer?
Beer, right? And is beer a womanly drink or a manly drink?
Man.
Manly drink, right? Every time we see a beer commercial,
Always man.
it's always a man, or it's a really good-looking woman trying to sell the beer to the man, right? Yeah.
Never the one drinking it.
So it's interesting, and Adon, this is the last thing I'll say. So Adon says here, aren't foods gender neutral? Well, yes, right? Because both sexes eat this stuff and this stuff, but we see certain foods marketed to particular genders, right? Okay, that's all I'm going to say for now. We'll come back to this on Monday. Have a good weekend, everybody. And I'll see you Monday, okay? All right.